Good morning. So, exactly this time last year, I was here in Perugia in a session when a voice note popped up on my signal. It came from Christopher Wylie. He was supposed to be here with me in Perugia, but a freak flood in Dubai meant he had somehow found himself trapped in that city and had ended up at a party full of Silicon Valley venture capitalists, crypto millionaires, TikTok influencers, and biohackers. Have a listen to the message he sent me.
Okay, so I don't know if you can hear me. I'm in the toilet at this event, and it's interesting because people here, they're talking about longevity, how to live, like, if not for a long time, how to live forever, but also prepping, how to prepare for when people revolt and when society gets completely undermined. And the thing that I think about is you have, in another part of the world, a bunch of journalists talking about how to save democracy. And here you've got a bunch of tech guys, tech bros, thinking about how to live past democracy and survive.
You probably remember Chris as the guy with pink hair who blew the whistle on Cambridge Analytica in 2018. And Chris and I did eventually manage to meet up. That voice note was a beginning of a year-long investigation we worked together on. Our podcast, which is called Captured and is available as of April 3rd on Audible, tries to understand what's really going on inside the tech world, how the rest of us are being captured by big tech, how we can fight back. Our reporting took us from the lofty hills of Twin Peaks in San Francisco to meet the people building the AI, to the informal settlements in Kenya to meet the people training the AI. In one enormous upmarket tech bro frat house called the AGI House, or Artificial General Intelligence House in San Francisco, we went to a 50-man hackathon one Saturday, and yeah, they were pretty much all men. We took our shoes off with everyone else at the door and went in to meet machine learning CEOs and humanoid robot developers who described a future with AI as a utopia, a place where we'll never have to work, where all our suffering will be ended, where AI does everything for us and we'll be able to connect it to our brains. Here's the founder of AGI House, Jeremy Nixon.
Well, I guess the intention is to, first of all, allow every human to know everything that's known by every human and AI, right? So you want real-time, on-the-fly, comprehensive knowledge of everything that you're interacting with.
Are you saying that you want to basically install all human knowledge into every human?
That's the purpose of the education system.
Well, yes, I suppose, but one of the joys of life is to be curious to find out about things. And if you already knew everything from birth, then what would happen to curiosity? As a journalist, of course, I had to ask about curiosity. People in Silicon Valley want a free pass to propel us into this future they believe fervently in. And they want to do it without guardrails, without government intervention. The day a young man on a roof tried to shoot Donald Trump, Chris and I were at a barbecue in Cupertino. No one was really talking about the attempted assassination, although perhaps they would have been a couple of days later when Trump chose Silicon Valley's own J.D. Vance as his running mate. We got talking to tech investor and former chief technology officer for a bunch of huge companies. His name is Alan Bain. And he talked about how important it is, from his point of view, that tech isn't captured by government regulation.
We have to be worried about people are going to over-regulate it. Europe is the worst, to be honest with you. Let's look at how we can benefit the society and how this can help lead the world, as opposed to trying to hold it back.
Some people might say that the reason we have democratically elected governments is so that they can put controls on things, so that they can keep us safe. And ultimately, they should be the ones deciding whether we regulate, not the people in this barbecue.
You sound like you're from Sweden. I'm sorry. I mean, that's social democracy. That is not what we are here in the U.S. This country is based on a constitution. We're not based on everybody being equal and holding people back. No, we're not in Sweden.
We were at an American barbecue. And there's a lot to talk about. our ultimate finding after finishing reporting surprised us. And really, there's no better place to discuss it than in this church. You'll soon find out why I find it to be such a fitting venue. But first, the good news is that Chris Wylie did make it to Perugia this time around, and I want to ask him to join me on stage. Welcome, Chris. Joining us also is Julie Pazzetti, who's one of the world's leading researchers into journalism and technology. Here's Julie. And Natalia Antelava, our executive producer, the founder of Coda Story, and my editor, who will moderate the conversation. Thank you.
I think we might be missing a mic. We will share.
Oh, no, here's one. Here you go.
I have to, it's good to share. Hi, everyone. Thank you, Isobel, for setting this up so beautifully. And Chris, it is fantastic that you finally managed to make it.
One year
to Perugia.
later, but yeah.
Yes, but do tell us about that party.
Yeah, okay, so this time last year, I was supposed to come, and I was traveling from Asia, so I had a Connect in Dubai, and I had the unfortunate luck of landing right when all the floods started happening. So I couldn't make my connection to Rome. And I was like quite literally trapped at the airport. I mean, the staff abandoned the airport, and it was sort of Lord of the Flies, everyone for themselves. You couldn't get I mean, there was, the roads were underwater, so you couldn't get like an Uber or anything. And I just walked out of the airport and just walked in the water and onto the highway, and I just started walking towards Dubai. And thankfully, partway through, I got picked up. There was a group of Pakistani workmen in a truck that was big enough that could drive kind of on the side of the road where it wasn't fully underwater. They picked me up. But then I was like, what should I do? And I was like messaging you, and you were like, can you still come? Can you get another flight? I'm like, Natalia, I don't think you understand. Like, it's like, there's like a climate disaster happening. The sky is orange. Like, it looks like the world's ending. I'm in the apocalypse. Like, and then I was sort of wondering, what should I do? Because these workmen, they sort of dropped me off close to the city, and then I was just sort of standing there again in water going, what should I do? By coincidence, it was crypto week in Dubai. And so...
And the tech bros had no trouble flying in.
No, they were all trapped. They were trying to leave, but a private jet still can't get out. Oh, right. Yeah, no, you know, the climate, no amount of money, you can't resist nature. And so I went onto Twitter and just started trying to find, like, do I know anyone, like, at Crypto Week? Like, is there anyone I know? I found, so an engineer who I know was in the city in Dubai, and I was like, I have nowhere to stay. I'm literally like wet, standing in water, and my phone's going to die. Is there somewhere I can go? And so he gives me a location and says, come here because they have extra rooms, and there's a bunch of us, and we're having a party. And so I make my way to this like very posh neighborhood. It turns out it's like a compound, like with walls and guards and stuff. It kind of, with the water, it looked like it had a moat. And so I went into the moat, and then I banged on the door. There was a guard, and I was like, I'm Chris, and I think I'm supposed to be here. And they let me in. And inside, it was literally a party. Like, it was, outside it was the apocalypse, and inside it was a crypto party. Just having fun. And it was hosted by a guy by the name of Brian Johnson. And for those of you who don't know, he's a man who's trying to live forever. He consumes his son's blood, or a blood boy, as he calls it, to sort of reinvigorate the youth. He's kind of like an alchemist of our age. And I ended up having dinner with Brian Johnson, a bunch of crypto millionaires, some Emirati princes, and it was really bizarre because the world was falling apart outside, And inside, we're at this party talking about the future and what we are going to create. And when it was at that moment, and it was that party that really, I think, inspired a lot of what then the podcast became, because when these guys started talking about living forever, seriously, like they trying to live forever, and enhancing their genetics and trying to buy time so that we can figure out how to connect our brains to AI so that we can then sort of evolve from our mortal selves and connect with the AI and live forever and spread ourselves through the universe. And I was sitting there thinking, like, right, this is like really culty vibes, really culty vibes. And I think that inspired a lot of the, I then had a call with you and I was like, guys, this is effing nuts. Like, I don't even know where to start. Yeah, and obviously
then
you
we
made me
hope all of
promise.
you.
You made me promise. Don't go to Dubai this year.
Yes, well, he was banned from.
And I
going to
promised that I
Dubai.
wouldn't go to Dubai.
He was banned from going to Dubai
Yeah.
this year. But Chris, can you? So obviously, we hope that all of you will download the podcast. The irony of the fact that it only is on Audible, because we all have been
Capitalism.
captured, has not been lost on us. But it's worth the listen. And you build through the podcast and Isobel's reporting and your kind of analysis, basically builds to sort of almost what has become like the final argument of the podcast. And we don't want to give too much away, but I do, especially given that we are in the church.
Yeah.
I would love you to tell us a little bit about what that your argument is, and whether in that future that they were talking about at the party, and so many people that we've talked to, you and Isobel talked to through the past year, whether there is place for journalism in that future that they're building.
So when you talk to somebody who seriously is trying to live forever, and it's like not a joke, it's a really interesting conversation. And it really makes you take a step back and think about like what actually is being built in Silicon Valley by all these men. If you think about AI and you think about, well, we're in a church, so I'm just going to go there. If you think about God, whichever sort of denomination or flavor of the divine, what is God? God is this thing that is all-knowing, it's all-seeing, it's all-powerful, it transcends time, it's immortal. And if you talk to a lot of these guys, the very senior ones who are building AGI, artificial general intelligence, creating something that has all human knowledge put into it, that surpasses any single human in its understanding of the world and the universe, and that is everywhere, connected to every device in every city, in every home, that's watching you and thinking about you. And if we turn it on and let it start to influence society, that it's very subtly making decisions about you, where you can kind of feel it a little bit, but you can't see it or touch it. And then imagine you have a bunch of men who also want to live forever, defeat death, become immortal. And in order to do that, they have to find a way to connect themselves to this creation. These men see themselves as prophets. Brian Johnson, the guy that we had dinner with, literally said, and this is in the podcast, we've got it wrong. God didn't create us, we're going to create God, and then we're going to merge with him. And when you look at all the weirdness of Silicon Valley, and all the weird things that these guys say and do, if you start to understand that there's aspects of this that are like a cult, a fundamentalist cult, or a new religious movement, a lot of their actions start to make a lot more sense. When you listen to somebody like Sam Altman talk about, we're just going to put everyone out of work, but it's okay because we're going to have AI, and we can connect to the AI. You have Elon Musk saying, quote, I want to spread and seed consciousness through the universe, right? I mean, they say these things all the time in public. And if you actually start to interpret these statements not as just some passing flippant comment, but that there's a pattern to it, I think that we're dealing with a cult in Silicon Valley. And that was my conclusion going through this process and talking to people in the Valley, that we're dealing with like nutters.
Judy, I want to sort of come to you because obviously, you know, you are not at that party. You have been at all the gatherings, you know, this one in Perugia over the years, but so many others. You are, you know, your research, you've done some absolutely groundbreaking research into technology and journalism, the intersection of the two. My question for you is, and it's a question that, you know, I thought of again and again as we went through, you know, making the podcast, is, are we as an industry, are we having the right conversations?
Good question. And I think, no, actually, we're not. And unfortunately, those of us who are journalists and researchers who've been prescient, as I would say you have, Natalia, and Coda has, as Chris has, as a whistleblower, you know, sounding the alarms. We've routinely been gaslit about these sorts of concerns. We've been kind of you know, defamed in some cases as kind of being crazy ourselves for kind of, you know, surfacing these sorts of trends. And I think this, you know, the platform capture that I started writing about in 2017 with reference to journalism and its dependency on tech, which goes well beyond the kind of economic dependency that is acknowledged, to a really unhealthy relationship that has seen the tech bros, and they are for the most part men, as you've highlighted, who are so empowered, imposing not just a kind of masculinist view of the world, which the podcast illustrates, you know, really effectively, but who are, as we have seen again and again demonstrated, including by Elon Musk saying that, you know, the downfall of Western civilization can be attributed to empathy. So they're demonstrating their kind of, you know, anti-humanity style thinking about issues. When we think about journalism and its function in trying to safeguard democracy and information integrity, which sound like quaint ideas and have themselves been, you know, undermined in recent years, the fact that we're not appropriately linking the kind of, you know, nefarious track of the broligarchy, as you and others have referred to it, which is taking us down this really dystopian path with a sort of omnipotence, omniscience, you know, that they want to engender, and all of the things associated with it, like the, you know, eugenics, the sort of cult-like behaviours. The difference between this cult and other cults, I would argue, is the extraordinary wealth and power at a global level that seeks to upend, particularly the post-World War II order of things. So, you know, objectives including peace, open societies, access to information, freedom of expression, in the actual sense of freedom of expression being protected under international human rights law. And so I think we risk, once again, not risk, we are once again in the thrall of tech. I mean, you just look at this wonderful conference's agenda and you see how much emphasis is on AI in terms of how we can use it, how we should use it. And of course, those are, you know, important questions that we should discuss and try to understand. But I think these sorts of conversations are equally as important. And I see this kind of tech-led obsession. Again, I would argue that we need, in a journalistic context, editorially led approaches to engaging with technology and those who seek to benefit from it most. I mean, and I just came away from this podcast not just concluding that we have been, once again entrapped by the sort of obsession with the tech without the necessary critical lens and without the sort of recognition of our role as journalists and human rights defenders, which are interlinked functions, in ensuring accountability, which is what these tech bros want to avoid. And that's why we all need to be more like Sweden, I would say.
Part of the reason we went with capture is because as a title is they're kind of like a range of capture, right? We've been like everything from the argument that we make is that from intimacy to politics, we've sort of been captured by a small class of incredibly wealthy men who make incredible products that make our lives very convenient. Part of that is also the narrative capture. There are basically two dominant narratives, one being, it's doom and gloom, and the other one is it's gonna save us. So what we try to explore is that something in between. I do have a question for you, but before I ask that, is like Isobel, reporting on it through this past year, what has been kind of like the biggest revelation for you? What surprised you the most?
I mean, Julie mentioned and Chris also mentioned cults and conspiracy theories, and that has been really the focus of my reporting before I started this project. Before the pandemic, I was very consistently reporting within cult and disinformation kind of circles. I did a lot of stories on QAnon, on anti-vaxxers throughout the pandemic, and conspiracy theorists. I went to a lot of anti-COVID, anti-lockdown protests and QAnon protests, and I spent a lot of time with people like that. But the thing that I sort of comforted myself with, even when QAnon very intensively kind of infiltrated the Trump administration, and Chris knows a lot about that personally, but that these were really ultimately fringe figures, and they weren't, as Julie said, they weren't the richest and most powerful people in the world. They didn't have the immense, sort of almost unthinkable power that the people in Silicon Valley have. And so you can't really comfort yourself with, oh, these are just people on the fringe. These are sort of people with, horned helmets, and they'll go away eventually. They'll find something new to kind of latch onto. This is a movement, and a quasi-religious movement, where the leaders have everything within their power, not only money, but also, they've completely captured the Trump administration at this point. And in a way, they don't really care about politics that much. You get the sense that sort of democracy and the White House and politics in general, they'll just sort of do away with at some point. They have no interest.
Power, isn't it? It's power, not
And
politics.
so this sort of takeover that they're envisioning is well within their sights, and I'm afraid that I do believe in it for them. I do believe that they're perfectly capable of taking it to their natural conclusion, which is something that really surprised me and scared me.
Throughout the past year, as we were working on this, I often thought, so I am myself Georgian, and very, in the early 2000s, whenever, even before the Russian invasion of Georgia in 2008, that was the precursor to the annexation of Crimea and the subsequent war that has changed Europe and the world, whenever I talked about the danger of Russia at a party, somewhere, I was always basically looked at as someone who is a bit crazy and a bit of a conspiracy theorist and anti-Russian. I thought of that a lot through the past year, because I think a lot of people will listen to us. and say you're anti-technology. What do you say to that, Chris?
I'm not anti-tech, and actually I don't think anybody here is anti-tech, because this is a word that has been co-opted by Silicon Valley. Silicon Valley defines themselves really narcissistically as technology, which is bullshit, because we've had technology since the dawn of time. This church that we're in was built with all kinds of features of engineering. And I think it's really arrogant for Silicon Valley to call themselves tech. Like, as if like nuclear engineering is not tech, or cancer research is not tech. It's all tech. Human society is technology. So I think it's impossible to say that anyone is anti-tech. What I think we need is to reframe, because we are against abuse. We're against, financialization of all of society, grifting, screwing over the consumer, and also completely undermining like civil society. This is not tech. This is abuses of power, and I think that's what, at least personally, that's what I'm against. I work in tech still. I love building stuff, but I don't want to build things that hurt people. And I think most people actually in the tech industry, regular engineers, they're not billionaires, they're just like regular engineers. They also don't want to build things that hurt people. And I think one of the frustrations also that I have to get back to journalism, I'm not a journalist here, but I know that a lot of journalists are here, is I feel like there's this double standard when journalists like engage with the tech industry, if we can call it that. Imagine if you had like the CEO of Goldman Sachs say that he doesn't believe in democracy. What do you think would happen if Goldman Sachs came out and said, I don't believe in democracy? Like, that would be a story, right? If you had the CEO, well, Peter Thiel said that, right? If you had the CEO of Ford Motor Company say, we are on a mission to ultimately replace all workers, that would be a story, right? If you had the CEO of a big insurance company say, we're investing in neurotech research so that we can connect all of our customers' brains to our computer so that we can interface with their minds. That sounds nuts. And probably if all these CEOs said these things, first of all, it would be a big story because we take them seriously. And they would probably have to resign. But when you have Elon Musk saying, I have a company and my goal is to interface with everyone's brains, I believe that God is going to be created in the servers in my company, and he has said that multiple times. It's in the podcast. If you have Sam Altman saying, we are going to ultimately put everyone out of work, right? And the reaction of journalists, no offense, is just blasé. You don't call it out because you guys don't take them seriously. And you don't listen to what they say. When you actually listen to what they say, it's super disturbing. When you have a bunch of men who think that they are going to replace humanity with machines, that is an anti-human ideology. And that is what I think is growing in Silicon Valley. It's anti-humanism. They call it transhumanism, but it's about replacing humans. If you think that immortality will be achieved by uploading humanity into a computer and making our bodies redundant so that we can then shoot them into the stars and, as Elon Musk says, spread consciousness through the universe, right? That you are on a prophetic mission to destroy humanity. And just listen to what these guys say. And actually, if you take them seriously, and I think you should take them seriously because these are the richest men in the world, with some of the most powerful companies in the world, with access to the President of the United States, and running the US.
Access to, but like
running the United States government,
yeah.
right? And this is what they believe. and you don't have to take my word for it. Like, you can just go and listen. These are all public quotes. This is all publicly available. Just listen to what they say and actually take them seriously. And if you take them seriously, it's super scary.
And I want both of you to jump in. So not only we're not having the right conversations, but are we as journalists not telling the right stories, and why?
So I think Chris's point, sorry.
No, go ahead.
I think Chris's point is pertinent, and it goes to what I was saying about this, is that we're afraid to treat the crazy seriously because it is so unhinged when you listen to it. But actually, they are so empowered, as Chris suggests, that these missions are real and they're fully funded. And they have removed the guardrails. They actively resist the guardrails. They say, no, it's too hard to slow down. We can't do that. We can't have rules and regulations inhibiting our innovation. I mean, as journalists, we are not focused enough on the safety risks associated with this. And I mean, not just safety risks in terms of people being mowed down by automated vehicles, but also the sort of inherent safety risks to societies and people, so disabled people, women. I mean, these men have also talked about, essentially being able to avoid the need to support humans who don't actually measure up to their superhuman status according to their ideology. In other words, we can discard those people who do not measure up and who do not offer optimum efficiency, for example. So I think we need to take them seriously, and I think there are lessons from coverage of the Trump campaign, which involved journalists saying things like, look, he says this, and voters, he says this, but actually we're not convinced he will do it. Well, he said it, and he is doing it, and he is doing it with the advice and assistance of several of these men at the top of the food chain here. So accountability reporting demands that we are interrogating these decisions through the lens of understanding the cult that is operating beneath the surface and its ambitions. I think that's essential.
So I'm based in Rome, which some people might say is a strange place to be based for a tech journalist, but actually it's been really fascinating because one of the sort of groups that is truly taking the AI threat as they see it seriously is the Vatican. And we've been really interested in what the Vatican has been saying and the sort of reports and white papers they've been putting out and the advice that's been going on within Vatican City about AI. So they've got this priest called Paolo Benanti who advises the Pope. And the Catholic Church have always known how to harness technology and spectacle to kind of inspire faith in a higher power. Like they were called the Silicon Valley of, they were the Silicon Valley of their age in a way. They understand what Silicon Valley is doing, perhaps on a deeper and more profound philosophical level than any government. A few weeks before we released the podcast series, the Vatican released a statement, and it was an incredibly detailed, long white paper that I read through, and it talked about how we're in danger of worshipping AI as a substitute for God. And if we continue down this path, we could become destroyed by AI. As AI gets more advanced and efficient, there's a risk human beings will become dispensable. And to us, when we read that, it almost felt as if the old religion was coming out, to do battle with the new one. It was so fascinating, and it really reflected a lot of what we had been seeing in Silicon Valley, kind of in the inverse in Rome. So I thought that was really fascinating.
It is. I want to make sure that we take questions and leave the time. But before we do, Chris, one of the things I learned a lot from you over the past year, but one of the things that I think is really important for this audience in particular to hear is your comparison of tech to electricity. Because, I think one of the things with technology in journalism is that tech journalism is very siloed into a tech beat. Like, everyone looks at it as a beat. And I'm basically asking you to say, to do that, to explain what that comparison is.
So I think it's really weird that we use this word tech as if like we haven't had tech until sort of 10 years ago, right? Like it's really weird to me because all of human advancement has been advances in learning and knowledge and applying that to create tools, which is technology. The application of knowledge to create a tool is technology. And we've had all these like great advancements in our technological, capabilities, throughout our history. 100 and a bit years ago, it was when cities were being electrified. And that was a profound shift. It changed everything from like work to sleep patterns to everything. Electricity completely changed how human life was. But there wasn't like an electricity beat. Like I'm an electricity reporter. I don't know, somebody's probably after going to correct me and go, actually, like the New York Times had their like electricity coverage. But when we are integrating AI into every facet of our lives, I mean, literally everything is touching AI now. To me, it's just really weird to silo it and consider it as this sort of separate thing in the same way that we wouldn't cover electricity as a separate topic. And the reason I say that is because if you silo technology and you start thinking about technology as the tech itself, you kind of ignore like, oh, that maybe this is actually a fascist movement, right? So you had, for example, Mark Andreessen, who is, one of the investors in Facebook and all kinds of these, one of the most prolific investors in Silicon Valley. He released the Techno-Optimist Manifesto, which is sort of essentially, he summed up the ideology of Silicon Valley. And he quotes from an Italian futurist who also worked with Mussolini to found and expand the Italian Fascist Party. And the weird thing about that is he released this Techno-Optimist Manifesto, and very few people called out that he was literally quoting a fascist in his manifesto. And because we think of tech as this thing rather than it's a bunch of men with power.
And it's the same reason we are not regulating it either, right?
Movement. It's a fascist movement. When you actually look at the history of fascism and futurism, fascists have always fetishized the notion of the future, right? Like 100 years ago, when fascism was like all the rage, as it is today, what were the fascists thinking about? They were thinking about strong men disrupting society and creating their vision of the future, and all the weak people will fall beneath them, and they will lead us into a glorious future. And they loved the futurists because the futurists were thinking about cars, which were really cool at the time. Flying rockets were being invented, right? Eugenics was like the hot new thing, right? And it's the same thing today. Self-driving cars, the rockets are going to Mars, and instead of eugenics, we just call it longevity or biohacking. It's the same shit.
And don't forget that Elon Musk's grandfather, was the founder or closely associated with the founders of a technocratic movement, which is now...
literally, it was called technocracy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So here we are. At the ultimate.
It all comes full circle.
And can you, and how does that fit into the regulation debate? Because one of the, the very dominant narratives is that we don't really understand tech because we can't regulate it because we don't really understand.
Before we talk about regulation, you have to first start talking about resisting fascism. How would you regulate Mussolini? Really?
Well, they had an ultimate solution.
It's like, oh, if only we pass this regulation, the fascists wouldn't have taken over. First of all, call it out. And this is, sorry to bash on journalists, but it's your guys' fault because you guys are talking about this as it's it's an app or it's a widget or whatever. And it's like, no, it's a fascist movement. They literally quote fascists. They fetishize fascism and the future, and you guys aren't talking about it.
So what do? We throw away our iPhones and we never use Uber and we don't scroll through Instagram? That would be good, but what do? Well, give up the convenience?
No, I think the first thing is actually properly discussing and framing what's really happening and informing people about it. And actually, like, listen to what they say, report what they say, take them seriously, right? When they say crazy things, actually call them out and go, wait, that's batshit insane. When Sam Altman says, we're going to replace all human workers, and no one goes, what gives you the right to do that? Why? You know, when he was at Congress, no one asked him why. Like, it's the obvious question. I want to replace humanity, and I go, why? Why? Why do we want this? Why are you allowed to do this?
And no one said no.
No,
Exactly.
and this is the point. We talk about this in the podcast. Say no. You can just reject their framing. When we talk about cults and prophets, right? When you listen to Silicon Valley talk about the future, they use prophetic language. They don't go, oh, like, we might go and do this, or we might. They say, this is what the future is going to look like. Listen to how, like, definitive and authoritative they say the future is going. You know, we're going to replace people. Everything's going to be automated. We're going to have UBI. This is how it's all going to work. It will happen.
There will be no nation state.
There will be no nation state.
Yeah.
It's a prophecy.
Which means that you need to cover this movement like you would cover a cult.
Yeah.
Right? So that's what's been
Because
missing.
they're all mad. They're all mad. And we should actually, like, show people that they're mad. Like, it's not, I was talking, Mona's in the audience, and I was talking, hi. Stop being polite about the whole goddamn thing, because they're crazy. Just because they're rich, you don't have to be polite.
Does anyone have questions? We'll start with Mona.
While we wait for questions, I think we're going to put a QR code on the screen so that you can have a look at, yeah, there it is, the podcast and all of the reporting we've done around it. So that will take you to the Coda Story site, and then from there you can go to Audible.
Hi, my name is Mona Al-Tahawi. I'm the author of Feminist Giant Newsletter. Hello, Chris. It was great to meet you this morning. Listening to you, Chris, and Julie both mention how very few journalists take what these men say seriously, including Donald Trump and others. I think is a reminder of the importance of the race of those men, because they're all mostly men, and it's mostly white men, and those who aren't white men are men of South Asian descent who are Hindu supremacists or of a Hindu supremacist background. So we have to frame this also as white supremacy and Hindu supremacy. And what does that mean for those of us who are not white, who are not men, and who gain no benefit from this supremacy? Because that's what really frightens me as a feminist, as a woman of color, as a queer person. When I see this and I see that the majority of journalists in this room are white, and they miss the race aspect of this, and they miss the supremacy aspect of this. That is the really frightening aspect of today's fascism for me, because I know who it's coming for, and I know who refuses to see who is launching those attacks. So could you talk about the white supremacy and the Hindu supremacy behind all of this? Thank you.
Sure.
So, could I start? As part of the reporting that we did, it was very important for us to understand not only the people who are kind of preaching about this tech, but also the people who are actually involved in training it and making it happen. And so we went to Kenya, where we went into Kibera, which is the biggest informal settlement in Africa. And when you go to Kibera, we met a young man called Felix, and he told us that out of all of the young people, say Gen Z people that you see in that settlement, probably he said he reckoned around 7 out of 10 of them were working for either Meta, TikTok, OpenAI, training these algorithms, basically. The conditions that they live in are shocking, and it's also quite shocking, I think, to visit someone's house. We visited a woman called Mercy's house. She had no roof, there was water running through the house. And this is someone who works at Meta. And you don't think of tech workers as living in houses with no roofs. And this is the
Those of you going to the Oversight Board reception this week, Meta Oversight Board reception,
where's
might
the
want to
oversight?
ask, ask the question.
And not only are they living in these conditions, but they're incredibly traumatized by the work that they've done, basically looking at the most horrendous parts of the internet and teaching the AI to recognize those so it doesn't spit out, say, something about child abuse when you ask it to write a story about a father and his son. And so this is the reality of this technology, that it's built on the backs of these, of these young people in Africa. And I think that was really important for us to highlight and to show that this isn't, this isn't some magical thing that these prophets in Silicon Valley have built. This actually involves a huge amount of human labor.
And it's almost slavery. I mean, this is relevant here. Like you have the sort of exploitation of people in the global majority world, predominantly black and brown people, who are being utterly exploited in the service of the cult and the technology. And then, to Mona's point, being both misrepresented and excluded, but also being prolifically more targeted when it comes to the weaponization of these technologies with reference to disinformation, with what we call online violence, targeting people at, according to their identities. And when you factor in that Elon Musk has imported to the US the white supremacist ideology of the white farmer movement in South Africa, it all is so much more evil, frankly.
I want to play devil's advocate because without hijacking Mona's white supremacy question, because I want you to address it as well. But, not only there is also incredible amount of opportunity that has come with the technology as well. And an incredible amount of convenience that has made life a lot better for many people. So we can't just leave that out, I think, of the equation. So how do we address all the bad and terrible things while not giving up on some of the good things that tech has done?
Because, Natalia, you're falling for the framing again. Because you're talking about the technology and not the underlying fascism, right? So, it's not that we're against AI, and I think there are a lot of conveniences and all that, but it's about how the people who are currently, we have allowed to be in charge of these things are abusing their positions of power in order to gain more power for their fetishization of the future and this bizarre future that they want to create. On the backs of black and brown bodies who are training their AIs. Sam Altman goes out and goes, we've got all these brilliant data scientists, and there are brilliant data scientists at OpenAI, but what people don't realize is the reason that AI knows all these things is because mostly Africans and Filipinos are working horrendous conditions to constantly brute force train these AIs to recognize stuff. And it's colonialism all over again. There was a race for oil, there was a race for rubber, there was a race for all kinds of resources. And we as white men in Europe and in America used those people all around the world to collect and gather resources that we can then take, create economic power, military power, to then further dominate those people, and that's what's happening right now. You wouldn't ask, but oil does good things too. So we should recognize that oil does good things, right? For energy companies that are going around, bribing public officials and undermining democracy, you wouldn't have asked that question. And this is what I mean about the framing. Even you fall for it.
I get in trouble with him all the time.
Because stop thinking about the tech. Start thinking about the fascism. Right? Because as soon as but AI has, then imagine if we talked about big pharma that way, or big oil that way, or, but we've got to give it credit. BP does some good stuff. We should give more credit to these oil companies. ExxonMobil, what about the good things that ExxonMobil does? Yeah, of course. We use oil all the time, but it's not about that. It's about the power structure and what they're doing. It's not about the tech.
Let's take one more question. We sadly cannot take, I'm being told that we can't take any more questions, but Chris is around. And sorry, we're out of time. As we wrap up, I just want to say one thing that I have not said to you, actually, through the past year. We've talked a lot, but this is one thing that I haven't said, and that is thank you. I think all of us in this room owe you a huge debt of gratitude for your courage, for blowing a whistle on Cambridge Analytica 10 years ago, and for continuing being incredibly brave, because you are a tech bro.
I am a tech bro, but thank you, Natalia and Isobel, for putting up with me. It's a lot. I'm a difficult person to work with sometimes.
Not at all.
I've got ideas and I've got thoughts and I've got but thank you for putting up with me and also like giving me a chance to make a really cool thing with you and with Isobel where we all got to like go on a little adventure together. It was really fun.
And I hope all of you will listen to it.
Yeah, and he's a natural.
Thank you so much.